done. It's 11:30, and now it is time for public comments. These are public comments on matters not appearing on the agenda. Are there any comments on matters that are not appearing on the agenda? Seeing none, then these are comments on the guided tours, and I will call Mark Soika. Okay.
And do I just like stand here?
Or sit, or however you want.
I appreciate your time coming out today. And I'm a Simi Valley resident for 39 years. And I'm here today on behalf of my family and my future family and my friends, and just to express some concerns that we have about the product that's proposed. And I appreciate the chance to be able to share this with you. And I respect your time, so I'm trying to be quick and brief, not to belabor the point. But I trust that you enjoyed your tour today. And I'm sure you saw many interesting things while you were out there on the landfill, but I hope during your tour that you also became aware of things that may not have been immediately pointed out to you. I hope you had a chance to spend some time at the top of the landfill, take a good long look at the city below, and looking south, you would have noticed the Madera corridor leading right into Wood Ranch, which is less than 3 miles away, full of homes and senior living facilities, schools and parks, and thousands of residents beneath that are going about their daily activities. Directly southwest of the landfill entrance and beneath the Reagan Library, I hope you noticed the other community of homes that include an assisted senior living facility, a senior mobile home park, all within 1.5 miles of the landfill. On the eastern side, if you had a chance, I don't know if the fog or the clouds allowed you to see it, but you'll see another community of over 700 homes and families. So it's definitely, I think it gives you a good perspective on how this expansion, even though the EIR states it being a rural location, it's actually very in the middle of the heart of our city. And also, I hope while you're up there, you had a chance to notice the beautiful geography of our city, the beautiful mountains and hillsides, and how they create this bowl-shaped valley, excuse me, which is beautiful, but unfortunately it creates a very good catch basin for all pollutants and air quality issues. They tend to be residing within that valley in that bowl-shaped geography. So I hope you were noticing that on your tour also. I don't know if that was pointed out to you. What I'm concerned about, and what we're concerned about, is that during this guided tour, you probably did not see any of the increased or unhealthy levels of the criteria pollutants that will not only affect the residents living directly downwind of the landfill, but the entire city of, we're getting close to 125,000 residents, not only now, but for the next 42 years, we're talking about the citizens of Simi Valley having to deal directly with these impacts of this expansion. Criteria pollutants such as ozone, nitrogen dioxides, sulfur dioxides, particulate matter 10 microns and 2.5 microns will be increasing beyond the legal threshold levels required by national, state, and local clean air laws for the public's health, safety, and welfare. The final EIR in section 3.2 about air quality states that project-generated emissions of nitrogen oxides, sulfur dioxides, and reactive organic compounds would contribute to secondary particulate matter 2.5 formation, some distance downwind of the emission sources. But you wouldn't see this on the guided tour, mainly because these harmful pollutants are so small that they're invisible to the naked eye, and they can even be absorbed directly into the resident's bloodstream. Also, what you didn't see on the guided tour are the numerous scientific studies that clearly show the health risks of this particulate matter that will be generated by this expansion, which according to Mike Villegas, the Air Pollution Control Officer of the Ventura County Air Pollution Control District, said it will increase from already unsafe levels by approximately another 20%, which again will directly impact not only those residents that are directly downwind from the landfill, but the entire city due to a process known as entrainment, where these pollutants are carried by traffic and wind and miles away from their original source. On the guided tour, you may have seen or heard promises of mitigation measures that will be taken to offset the increases in these criteria pollutants, and that this project, the increase that this project will bring to our citizens. But what you didn't see is that even with assumed full compliance with proposed mitigation measures, according to the final EIR and the cumulative analysis, that mitigated emissions from the project construction and operation would produce cumulatively considerable and unavoidable contributions to ozone, nitrogen oxides, particulate matter 10, and particulate matter 2.5 micron levels. Also, what you didn't see on this guided tour, and again I quote from the final EIR section 6.1, is that proposed project operations would result excuse me, in an increase in peak daily emissions that would exceed the Ventura County Air Pollution Control District's daily reactive organic compounds and nitrogen oxide emission thresholds, and that even mitigation measure AQ3 would reduce these emissions, but not to less than the Ventura County Air Pollution Control District's threshold of 25 pounds per day. And as a result, the reactive organic compounds and nitrogen oxide emissions during operations would remain significant and unavoidable. What you don't see on the guided tour, unfortunately, is that the increased health risks to our citizens and the litigation and fines that are sure to follow for failing to plan properly for the attainment of air quality standards as required by law will more than negate any assumed revenue enhancement from this unnecessary expansion. In fact, less than a year ago, back in October of last year, the San Joaquin Valley Air Pollution Control District was fined $29 million for their failure to achieve attainment status on these criteria pollutants. So we'll probably be next in line if we continue ahead. Now, Simi Valley has the dubious distinction as having the worst air quality in Ventura County. And this landfill expansion, even with all the proposed mitigation, will subject our city and its residents to another 42 years of worsening and unhealthy air. Surely there can be a better plan than the unnecessary importation of trash and pollution from outside our county just to enrich local and county coffers and Waste Management's bottom line at the expense of our citizens' health and our quality of life. Not only does the proposed project fail to meet the EIR stated objective of an operation designed and conducted in a manner that protects the natural environment, but the project as proposed fails to ensure the protection of the public's health, safety, and welfare. The continued and exacerbated increases in unhealthy criteria pollutants such as ozone, nitrogen oxides, and particulate matter 10 and 2.5 microns is not only a public health risk, but is completely contrary to the goals of attainment as mandated by national, state, and local clean air laws. I thank you again for your time, to take time to visit our beautiful city and tour the landfill that looms above us. I hope that on your tour you were able to take note of the location of the expansion and how the importation of trash from outside our county brings it straight through the heart of our city, right through the 118, and that it negatively affects every citizen. This expansion and the unnecessary importation of trash from outside our county will have significant health and environmental impacts on our city, its residents, for generations to come, unless you act to stop it as it's proposed. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. We also received this statement from Mark Soika in written form, so this will be included in the administrative record. Now I will call Wayne Fishbeck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I've got a document, I have 5 copies that I'd like for the commission to have. Is it all right if I just sit down here? I might start with a question too. How long do we have to submit written, or was that supposed to be done today? Or do we still have time to provide written comments?
Yeah, the official hearing's not until the 24th, so you have time to deliver.
Okay, very good. I just found out about this yesterday, so that's why I'd respond rather quickly. This document here, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on, but I think it's worth you reading. It's a document that was produced by the Santa Monica Mountain Conservancy, and it describes what I believe is kind of a quid pro quo here in terms of a permit for the expansion of this landfill for 2,000 acres that are going to be. This says that it's being purchased. I don't know whether it's a donation. It's the Nature Conservancy is supposed to initially get the land. But I think eventually it'll go to the Santa Monica Mountain Conservancy because the Nature Conservancy doesn't really hold land for any length of time. So I think that that's what's behind this deal. The second document I'd like to pass to you, I'm going to give you quite a bit more documents when I submit written comments, but there are 2 wildlife corridors, not just this one. There's one at the west end of the valley, There's one at the east end of the valley, and I happen to own about 150 acres that sits in the middle of the wildlife corridor down at the east end of the valley. Down in San Susana Pass, it's called, where you cross over the mountain going into the San Fernando Valley. So I think it's interesting, probably a lot of you know that there's a hearing this coming Monday over what's called the siting element. And that's basically involves quite a number of departments over in the county. But this siting element, interestingly enough, has been used against me and my ranch insofar as I've been sort of chased and harassed by the county for I think about 6 years now, and they claim that I'm the largest illegal landfill that's ever been in the history of Ventura County. So this is just one of the documents that they've used to cite me as far as needing a permit, but also using the siting element to say that I'm not entitled to a permit because I don't fit the siting element criteria. But that's just been sort of ignored with the Simi Valley landfill. I'm going to also, and I'll just do this very briefly, but I'm going to be providing you with some of the boards that we've prepared for some meetings that we've had with the community. And this particular board shows the general plan for Simi Valley. It talks about the general plan for Simi Valley and the county general plan. And these two general plans overlap each other. And if you read, again, this siting element, which I'm not exactly sure whether that's a planning commission issue or not, and it's going to be resolved in court in any event. But what is very much a planning commission issue is whether this land under the general plan is, I don't want to use the word zone because general plan and zoning is different, but under these waste laws you have to conform to the general plan conditions, and it's supposed to be signed off by the planning department that this conforms. Now in the county's general plan, this is not what is properly zoned for a landfill. It's what's called urban reserve. It's not open space. It's basically specifically been designated, this whole area, as urban reserve. And it's almost the only land around Simi Valley that's still available for development. As you know, almost all of the hills are zoned where you can't really build in the hills anymore. And there's really virtually no land left for Simi Valley to expand into except this beautiful valley area that's back up in here. And so you can see this is actually Simi Valley's general plan here. And so you can see these hashed areas which represent the valleys that are back up in here. And so in exchange for this wildlife corridor, which goes up here, instead of having development for Simi Valley through these beautiful valleys, we're going to have it filled up with garbage. Now to me, that's not very good planning. So I'll be turning that into you. This is just a photograph, and the valley is enormous. You could probably double the size of Simi Valley back in those valleys that are back up in there. This is another board. Let's see what I do. Violating City of Simi Valley general plans. I call it illegal dumping. Now, I don't want you to think I'm a NIMBY. I'm a retired architect and urban planner, and so I basically am the last person in the world to say, no, we just don't want to do it. We don't want anything happening here. This is just a quick sketch that I did of the general area. This is the current landfill right in here. And this yellow shape in here is generally the conformance of the buildable area of this roughly 3,000 acres that the landfill has. This is the 118 that's coming through here. And so there's plenty of space for the wildlife corridor to come through here and basically leave this land for development for the city instead of filling it up with garbage. And Waste Management has a beautiful site down here that could be developed right along this train track down here, which could be waste by rail. You may have heard that term. That's what they're doing in LA County. So they've got a great piece of property that you could come right off of the 118, right off of this interchange that they have down here, come down into this area. This has to be about 3 stories high in terms of accessing it, dropping it down through these bins, processing it, and right onto the rail. So it's just absolutely perfectly set up for that. This is another thing that I've mentioned in here, that Simi Valley is planning some locations for rapid transit and developing an additional rail station in here. And so this would be an ideal area back in here and around this stop here, which doesn't have an awful lot of residential, for high-density development. Now, you all know from being in the planning business that this is what the state and all the local governments are pushing, is this high density. And there's very few places where you can go that this is going to be acceptable. You're not going to go out here in the middle of the valley where it's all single-family homes and expect to basically be building 10, 15, 20-story, mid-rise buildings for high-density development. But this, people in Simi Valley, they'd never know it existed back there if it was developed. Now, this is a little bit outside of your field too, but it's something that really irks me. This is a posting of the rates about 2 years ago, and you'll notice down here, mixed C&D processing. Now, there have been, almost all of the jurisdictions now have what's called required recycling. And with the new building codes, with the green building code and all those things, the public is now required to recycle things, okay? Sounds like a reasonable thing, except the way the county's rigged it up is that it gets forced through either these transfer stations, which sort out a little bit of it, and then it just comes on over to Simi, or you go to Simi Valley Landfill direct. And basically you have to pay about a 15-20% premium to do this over here. Now, what happens to it? It sounds like a good idea initially, but here's what the stuff looks like. And if you look at the codes, it's very restrictive in terms of what you can actually use is what's called this alternative daily cover.
What is that?
This is what they call alternative daily cover, okay? And what they do is they have these sorting bins. I don't know whether you got up in their C&D recycling area, but they have this thing that's elevated. They have bins that are down below it. And so they pull out what they call wood waste, green waste. I think they pull out gypsum board, obviously metal, and there may be one, I think carpet may be one. So there's about 5 sorting bins that they drop this stuff down. Everything else goes out the other line, or out the other end. They also separate concrete, asphalt, what they call inerts, and those basically are brought over in another area of the landfill. Now, if you read all of the things that you're supposed to be putting in this alternative daily cover, once they've taken out those 5 things out in the bin, and they take off and recycle it to a metal recycler or whatever, and you take the concrete, asphalt, brick, all of the inerts out, I can't remember it by memory, but it's like plastic pipe. There's about 3 or 4 things that you're left with that's supposed to be used in this alternative daily cover. I've got hundreds of photographs of this stuff. I mean, it's just trash. It's just nothing but trash that's getting dumped in there. And so I don't think that's really your issue, but I think when we have an operation like this that's really not complying with the law, I think we've got to slow down and figure out what are we really doing here. And I think you probably have heard from some people about this auto shredder waste stuff, which of course the Cal EPA thinks is a hazardous material. And Simi Valley is getting, I think, 30 to 40% of the entire state's share of this stuff coming into this landfill. Back to my project, the state now, along with the county, has, I've got the statistics, I'll be glad to share them with you. They've spent the most money in the last 10 years, which I think is the entire length of this program, where the state pays for these big investigations of illegal dumps and stuff like that. So my ranch about a year ago was investigated for like 7 days. They dug for 5 days, and all they ever found on my property was soil and concrete. And this was the most expensive investigation in the history of the state, okay? Now these are all construction materials. If you go to the Green Book for Public Works specifications, you got concrete, brick, all these inerts, which you basically use in fill, road base, whatever. You know, the county's chosen to call it a dump. But nonetheless, that's all they found on this thing. So what happens is there's acres and acres of this concrete and asphalt brought in to the landfill, which is supposed to be used for roads, you know, specific things that would basically be, you know, fill for a road or a road itself. And so it just gets dumped, acres of this stuff, totally wasted, just dumped in the landfill. But yet it's called recycling. And so, you know, that gets them out of paying taxes, which they're supposed to be paying the state for. And so, to me, it's just a great big scam.
Where did you take this picture?
Up the landfill. And, let's see. No, this is too political. I'll just keep that to myself. So, those are my comments, and I'll follow up with some written material too. Thanks
Thank you very
much.
much. Do you intend to have those submitted
Yeah.
into the record? Are you doing that now, or are you doing that later?
You know, I spent a lot of money on these boards, so I think I'm just going to send you, 8.5 by 11s. Unless there's if you really would like the boards, that's fine. But I'll send you 8.5 by 11s.
That sounds terrific. Thank
Okay.
you very much.
You bet.
Are there any other comments? Do you want to fill out a card? And, you want to ask your question?
I wanted to correct myself here. A minute ago, you asked me if I was Armenian, and I forgot that I'm American, but by Armenian descent and Scots, English, and Irish, so I just wanted to clarify that because I put being an American citizen, born in the United States, to respect the veterans and the Indians of this country, so I wanted to rephrase myself for a moment.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thanks so much. Okay, seeing no other comments, are there any questions or comments that the commission has? Seeing none, we'll adjourn to March 24th. And the hearing is going to be at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. We're going to go until the evening hours. And we will meet at the City Council chambers, and it'll be noticed. So thank you very much for coming out, and thank you again, Waste Management, for providing the tour. We're adjourned.